Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Honestly Wrestling Sucks podcast, episode 3, where we debate honestly opinions presented by ourselves, along with ones submitted by you guys, the fans. The podcast is brought to you by Wrestling Republic, the home of the latest news, honest opinions, debates, and more in the world of professional wrestling. I'm your host, Ben, and this week I'm once again joined by Carl Kinahan, the man who was trained by Finn Balor and once pinned Becky Lynch and shared a pint with Keith Lee, who returned this week. How are you, Carl?
Fantastic. I don't know about the rest of the world, but Irish and English aren't meant for heat. I am
Oh my
melted this
gosh.
week. I'll be on jaw.
It really is a joke. Like I've literally been not being able to do anything all week. Like just sitting on my bed, I'm just sweltering. Like that's how bad it is. You can't even go outside. Can you show my fan?
No, right.
Okay,
We
cool.
won't
Yeah,
have you
I
sweating. By the end of
I've
this
got to
podcast,
get a
we don't want
fan
you
on,
bed and you
right?
sweat.
Yeah, I've got to have a fan on. That's how warm it is right now. Got a light above me. I have it off of the podcast every week, shining down on me. I'm sweating, not in the cold weeks. Never mind ones when it's 30 degrees outside. But anyway, we're getting right into discussing wrestling as per usual this week. It's exciting. And actually, I'm going to bring this up real quick. Val has just said in the comments, our NXT writer, where's the John Cena cap, Carl? The 1 week you're not wearing a John Cena cap, he returns.
I'm wearing it. You just can't see it. Like,
Oh, well, there we are then. That explains it. Right. We're going to get right on with the first, honestly. Honestly, Karrion Kross losing his main roster debut might not be as bad as people are suggesting. This past week on Raw, Karrion Kross debuted with a new entrance which was a lot simpler and blander than his NXT one. Scarlett Bordeaux was noticeably missing during the appearance, and Kross went on to lose to Jeff Hardy in less than 2 minutes. Reports have come out since then suggesting that some in WWE feel like this is a way for the main roster creative team to get back at NXT for losing the Wednesday Night Wars. However, I truly do not believe this is the case, as if it was, WWE and USA would have, if they had an issue with the ratings, they would have taken them off the USA network by now, but they haven't. I also feel like a lot of fans are jumping to conclusions, with some fans stating that Kross is now buried. He isn't. He did lose clean, and the way he lost could simply be to advance his character. Sorry, I correct myself there. He did not lose clean. And, the way they did it could be just, advance his character. Maybe they want to repackage him in a way and maybe even get him a new manager or have Scarlett rejoin him at a later date. There are tons of ways this loss could prove that he is set for a long-term push on the Raw brand. Now, could it have been done better? Of course it could, absolutely. The exact gimmick he had in NXT with Scarlett could have worked perfectly on the main roster. However, some fans have already claimed that the gimmick is getting stale, so it's entirely possible that the WWE higher-ups heard this critics from the fans and actually listened to them. Like Kota suggested last week, that WWE do actually listen to the fans. And of course, time will only tell whether or not this succeeds, but I do not think fans should instantly go, Karrion Kross is buried at this moment in time. What do you think about that, Carl?
I tend to agree. I wouldn't say Karrion Kross is buried per se. I'll say that it's not off to a good start, I would feel. I think the only reason Jeff did win is because he got his old team song back, and that kind of boosted the fans a bit, and so we probably knew that the fans would like hearing the song, so they wanted to play it twice just to kind of get the song over again in a way. But I'd say it wasn't a great start. It's personally one how I would have booked Karrion Kross's first night in Raw. I think what is really damaging is the fact it was the NXT champion. If it was like any other wrestler coming up, and you'd kind of have excuses and you'd understand it a bit more. But the fact it was the NXT champion, I'm not saying like the word as you said, I'm not saying they're trying to send a message to NXT or anything. I just think it makes NXT look very bad that Jeff Hardy gets beats most weeks in Raw in 2021. So the fact that the best of NXT champion who hasn't been pinned or beaten NXT was just beaten Raw in 2 minutes is devaluing of the character in a certain way. But I do know Vince McMahon doesn't like undefeated streaks as well. So sometimes he just likes to get that out of the way with.
Yeah. And one thing, though, the one issue I did have is the fact he brought the NXT title out. If he didn't bring the NXT title out, then maybe that would kill any possibility of this being, an issue between the main roster and NXT, which, again, I still don't think there is. But that would kill any chance of that. But again, he didn't lose clean to Jeff Hardy, and Jeff Hardy's done a lot. Jeff Hardy hasn't been seen on recent times in Raw. Comes back, new theme, empowered by the fans and everything, full of excitement. So I still just don't think that, essentially buried him at all. He came out, cut that promo afterwards in absolute fury. And as long as they do this right now, like they go for a crazy storyline where he just goes crazy, he's uncontrollable, he can't really do anything, he's getting mad, he's causing violence, but he's being quite ineffective and then losing stupidly and stuff like that. I'm not saying he should lose every match in this run, he definitely shouldn't, but if he loses a few matches and then in a couple of months, he's just like, well, I've lost a couple of feuds now. He's won a lot of matches too, but he's lost a couple of feuds. He's all angry. He's uncontrollable, completely mad. Then somebody else comes in, a manager, Scarlett Bordeaux even. Maybe they bring her up then and then put him with him. They control him. They maintain the anger. They put it to good use. And suddenly he is an absolute monster. Then long-term and stuff, you can always have, the defense for him losing whenever he does, lose the title or whatever, then long-term, to be, oh, well, he let the anger get the better of him. He didn't control himself or something like that. Like, you can do so many things, and I don't think it's a case of him being simply that he is buried at this moment in time. Now, Dakota Cohen, of course, who was the guest on last week's podcast, as I commented here, saying they had to reshoot a segment for NXT last night because the fans kept chanting Hardy. Yeah, I have heard this. Now, that is not that he has been buried, essentially. That is that the Capital Wrestling Center crowd are annoying. I spoke with this last week, I believe it was, or was it the week before? I can't quite remember. But the crowd in the Capital Wrestling Center absolutely sucks. I hate them. Like, I cannot watch NXT because of them. And not because of the volume, although sometimes they are silent, but they are just disrespectful. They cheer for the other people for the sake of it. They just toxicity at its finest. It annoys the hell out of me now. It's like the fourth rant I've gone on this podcast about that crowd. But seriously, that is the fan base. The fan base which is in the Capital Wrestling Center is my least favorite wrestling fan base in the world. Like, I prefer AEW Smarks over that. Like, I cannot stand it. I really cannot. So yeah. What do you think about the Jeff Hardy, them them cheering Jeff Hardy in the Capital Wrestling Center this past week not this past week on NXT, on the NXT tapings yesterday, Carl?
I completely agree with you. Like, that NXT takeover crowd, or whatever crowd in general. I just remember it was in the house, the takeover, the last takeover they had. That crowd ruined that pay-per-view for me. I went back and I did a rewatch of it because, like, I actually enjoyed some of the matches. Like, right, I'll do a rewatch of this, and they absolutely, like, they didn't give the wrestlers a chance, really. It's just they hated everything from the get-go. And that main event, the 5 was actually really, really good, but the crowd just, they weren't into it till like the last 5 minutes. So I think that's just the crowd trying to make the show about them, because I've noticed that with this crowd, they always do that. They just want to be the focus point, and they're not trying to enhance the product. Or I feel like even on Raw, the crowd on Raw was fantastic. The Raw wasn't the best Raw they've done, but the crowd definitely enhanced it because they just give the competitors a chance and stuff, And
the Dynamite last night is another perfect example. That Dynamite had some good things at the main event, but for the most part, it was a bit fairly average. The crowd made it feel fantastic. Like, I was thinking about this earlier. Some of those matches, if they were in Daly's place, such as, the Jericho one, Cassidy and the Blade, if they were in Daly's place with the no crowds, it would have been the most boring thing ever. It would be a terrible Dynamite. And the crowd was so into it, they were, creating excitement. They made it feel important. And I realized that Jericho is now back in front of a crowd. Seems like he's a lot more important again, which is, great. Dakota's also said here, main roster and AEW crowds are dope, minus the what chance, but that's expected. The only thing I hate more than the Capital Wrestling Center crowd is the what chance. Somebody said, commented, yes, calling us marks. Perhaps not too happy about our comment to do with the Capital Wrestling Center crowd, but yeah, they get on my nerves. But let's move on. Let's not spend the hour talking about how much, that crowd sucks. Carl, what is your next, honestly?
Honestly, Big Show is the worst booked big man in wrestling history. Just for the simple fact is, he was never face or heel for too long, so you could sink his teeth into it. As I think I said this in my last appearance in the podcast, rewatching old pay-per-views and stuff. Every pay-per-view, I watch the Big Show in it. He's face one week, heel the next month, and so on and so forth. And he just, for someone that's so athletic, so charismatic, so he's actually Big Show's really good on the microphone. Great actor as well. When Big Show needs to cry, the man actually weeps, and it looks very convincing. Like, he's very, very, very talented. But WWE for 20 years treated him like absolute dirt. Send him down to developmental because he was too big, and then he lost a heap of weight in 2001, and he came back looking amazing. And then they said, "Oh, you need to get bigger now because you're facing Brock." Then he had to go put on loads more weight, and then become a heel face, and just ruined him. And you could never get invested in the Big Show's character because he just constantly switching and changing, switching and changing. Big Show could have been a big star, I feel, bigger than he was. He's had a decent career. I wouldn't say it's been fantastic, but it's been a decent career. And I just think he could have been so much bigger if they was handled properly.
Yeah, and he's one of these big guys who is a true wrestling fan as well. And, he put so much effort into his career. And, he's got fantastic wrestling knowledge too. And he, as you said, like, it was a joke, like, through his entire career, even now. Literally, the amount of face and heel turns, mix them both together then. Turns he had, it was just ridiculous. I couldn't believe it at times. You honestly did not know whether to cheer or boo for him, to the point where towards the end, just everyone cheered for him constantly. And it was disappointing. I wish that he did, he got a run at the top more. And, he got some title runs at the, peak of his career. Of course, he did win the World Championship. I believe only once. Was it only once?
Twice. He won it in 99 and in 2002.
Right, okay. For whatever reason, I thought he won it more recently as well. But yeah, I mean, I remember back in the days of primary school, actually, this is Big Show. Everybody loved the Big Show. Even when he was a heel, just everyone just thought he was, he was just a giant to everybody. He was just a bigger than life thing. And at this time, the likes of, Randy Orton was just coming into it about, and others like that. They were the big names, Kurt Angle, the likes of them. But Big Show, and he never really did. He was just constantly around the main event scene, right? But never at the top of the main event scene, and never really in the world title picture, apart from a snippet of his career back and forth. Right, we talked about the two reigns. But yeah, you're right. He could have done a significant, he could have done a lot better. Yeah, Kurt was said here. He won the World Heavyweight Championship in 2011. That's what I was thinking of. I remember
the World Title.
I remember that happening, and I don't know why. Well, I can't remember if he was face or heel at the time, which probably says something about that. But I remember I was a bit annoyed and everything. And I went into school, and everyone was happy about it. I was just there thinking, am I missing something here? And looking back, he was great and everything. I think I was just, I was annoyed back then whenever Rey Mysterio wasn't champion, which was basically, it was never then. He lost every time. But yeah, I completely agree with what you said there, Carl. And now we're going to get on to an opinion from a fan. And this fan says, honestly, a lot of NXT talent fail on the main roster because the NXT product is so detached from that on the main roster. And now I saw this earlier on, right? This opinion's by at underscore ungovernable on Instagram. And I saw this earlier on, and straight away I was like, bang on. That is a really, really great opinion there. Because NXT the NXT product, right, is something for more hardcore fans, and their product's fantastic. But the point of NXT is, well, again, we talked about this last week. Is it now the point? Is it now a third brand? It seems that there's contradictory reports on what it's seen as. But the point originally was for it to be a developmental brand for the main roster. But they built talent almost to be like a polished version of what they are on the independent scene. And that, isn't what what the main roster look for in the slightest. So if you're building up talent, you then sell them the main roster, and then Vince McMahon or whoever looks at them and it's like, well, they're not ready for this. They're not used to this. This. They're not working the way I want to work. And sure, we can argue for days that the way Vince wants it in this day and age doesn't work anymore. But if you're presenting it in that way, you should at least prepare talent for the way you're doing it. It's like in youth academies in football. They train talent the same. They train youngsters, right, in the youth academy the same way they're training them on the first team. So then, when they can get called up, they, if they ever need to be called up or whatever, they can just fit in fairly easily. That's very noticeable. Marcelo Bielsa in at Leeds United, like, he is very, very specific about what the youngsters need to be doing, everything like that, and that is so there is no miscommunication between the two. Whereas in WWE, there's clearly miscommunication between the two. NXT is similarly preparing wrestlers for a main roster which doesn't exist. Then the main roster which does exist, they're getting the talent, and they're like, well, they're not prepared. So I do understand this completely. What are your thoughts?
I understand it to a certain extent as well. I can think about this question since you said it to me. But I think years ago, it used to be a different argument where it was NXT was more ROH type of style where the wrestling really mattered, and that was the part where NXT succeeded. But I don't know, WWE pay-per-views the last 2 years have actually been really good. They've been hitting out of the park in the pay-per-views. I don't think WWE haven't had a bad pay-per-view in about a year, I'd say. They've been really, really consistent with the pay-per-views.
Yeah.
So I think the wrestling's very good. So I don't think they'll have problems transition from NXT to the main roster wrestling. But what I think they find is, I think NXT is better at developing these characters and giving them time to breathe and time to go and time to be themselves and stuff. But where I find the main roster is very controlling and wants you to do things a certain way, and you have to look a certain way and be a certain way in terms of your appearance and stuff. But where I feel NXT allows, I just get the feel where it's more freedom, and I see that like Adam Cole's the same guy he was in ROH pretty much. Kyle O'Reilly's pretty much the same character, just tweaked a little bit based on the storylines that they're in. But I don't think it's as hard as a switch as it used to be. But there's definitely is a big bridging gap there, and I think it's all about how NXT treats talent compared to the main roster, where they're very respected and they're listened to in NXT. When you go to the main roster, they're kind of shut down. I don't think they're used to that, and then it kind of damages their confidence a bit.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Like, the system of the main roster doesn't work anymore. I completely agree with that. But like, even with the in-ring though, like, I think it is quite different in a way, because especially with television, on pay-per-view, it's different. But on television, NXT go like, full force throughout the commercial break. On the main roster, they do not. They're basically, in some headlock or something like that, right? Just, keeping the crowd interested, but not so not so anybody watching on TV misses anything. And that's a very hard thing, right? Getting the commercial breaks and everything. Like, people do not realize how hard that is for wrestlers to be, line everything up perfectly and all that for the commercial break. It's very, very hard. And I have a lot of respect for people in WWE who get it perfect. And AEW are actually improving on it a lot in recent times, because at first a lot of people there were not. They've improved that massively recently, and that's become clear on AEW. But it's also a bit slower at times in WWE, and it's a lot more. Whereas I feel like NXT is a little bit more relaxed at times. They let talent do a lot more big moves and stuff like that. Where in the main roster, you don't like doing as many big moves. And one big thing, or another big thing, was that the thigh slaps, which of course they're still happening sometimes in NXT. On the main roster, they're complete ban now. And they re-signed in the Capital Wrestling Center saying no leg slapping or whatever. The exact same sign they had in the Thunderdome, it's backstage at NXT as well. But that was never been a thing. Well, very rarely been a thing on the main roster in recent years. But it's been NXT is the thing which popularized it in WWE. And then they go up to the main roster, and I remember seeing it with Aleister Black and a couple of others. Andrade, and that's a purple one, Andrade, who did it a lot. They did it a lot when they got up to the main roster. Then they stopped doing it, fairly quickly and stuff. But as soon as they stopped doing it, they lost their momentum and stuff. Because maybe that's, Dakota Cohen is in the commentary, I'm not a fan of thigh slaps. Well, maybe Vince McMahon isn't too. And he saw that and that put him off Andrade or something like that. It's stupid, but it wouldn't surprise me. And it's stuff like this, like, it seems very simple, but if you're constantly, slapping your thigh in all your matches and everything, when you get called up to the main roster and you're not supposed to do that, it's a hard thing to, remember not to do. And why they need to make sure that they are teaching in a way that they're building talent ready for the main roster. And at the moment, they are currently not. Pierce Shearer said in the comments, we've got an opinion of yours coming up, Pierce. I'm not a fan of Vince McMahon. No, listen, Vince McMahon's done fantastic things for this industry. Nowadays, I think that not just him, but a lot of the higher ups in the main roster are outdated. They aren't really understanding the way that wrestling has transitioned. And because of that, it's not looking great at times for WWE. But I still have a feeling now that once crowds are fully, I know they're back now fully, but once the momentum starts to die down and crowds speak their mind a bit more, then WWE will have to listen to fans a bit more. Because they were before the pandemic. And then in the pandemic, like we've talked about this before, the booking was awful. Episodes of Raw and SmackDown, for the most part, were quite bad. The wrestling was fantastic, though. So if we keep that level of wrestling up and improve storylines and stuff like that, then there's a good, possibility. There was one thing which I didn't talk about, which I want to quickly address, which we haven't got in the notes for today, about Alexa Bliss and Money in the Bank. I wanted to quickly ask you, Carl, what are your thoughts on the entire Alexa Bliss gimmick?
I told you, I said this to you whenever it was, she's going to be hypnotized and just bringing people down and controlling people's minds. And, it's not for me. If you enjoy it, fair enough. It's not for me. And I noticed Alexa Bliss was over, but she was only over when she's been Alexa Bliss doing Alexa Bliss's move. But whenever she tried to do this freak stuff, the crowd not turned on her, but they didn't really care. They didn't give her much of a reaction. And I don't know, and the feud with Eve Marie is not really going to do anything for me either. I don't think it's too soon. Like Eve Marie's on the main roster, 3 weeks, and she's already in the spooky nonsense. So in terms of Alexa Bliss, the spooky stuff, they got away with it in the Thunderdome, but now they're really struggling for ideas, and it's clear as day.
Yeah. And that hurt Zelina, who's only just come back as well. The fact she got hypnotized, I'm like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, that's you're going to be seen in a different way now. And she didn't do anything. It's just, they got told that you got to be hypnotized. Alexa, that's where that's it. I'm not saying she's going to be buried now, but she's lost a lot of momentum off one spot alone, one dumb spot. I hated it. I don't understand. I haven't actually seen one person who liked it. I haven't seen a single person who liked the Alexa Bliss spot in Money in the Bank. Alexa's great. She's played the gimmick perfectly, to perfection. Anybody else's gimmick would seem a lot more dumb. If they cut out the hypnotizing and all this, magic BS and kept it, just suspending disbelief, right? Like, The Undertaker did. Where there's, not a logical explanation, but you could reach and make a logical explanation. Even when she makes her fall down from the sky, you can be like, well, she has a contact in production who did that. You can put pieces together, stretch reality a little bit. That's fine. But as soon as you start hypnotizing people, it makes no sense. It is just, there's no explanation for it. And that's when I think there's an issue in wrestling. People saying, The Undertaker did this, The Undertaker did that. I think twice in his career, Undertaker did stuff which was unexplainable. The rest of the time, it was stuff. People were referencing the Boneyard match constantly with the lightning and that. And I'm like, oh yeah, but you could know somebody in production. Like, I'm not being funny. But it's completely explainable. And somebody said, Zelina is already the least important female on SmackDown. She will drop to Tony this Friday, I think. Please no. Please no. She's got so much talent. She really does. It's very annoying to see. But I didn't want to talk about this for too long. And we're going to move back on now to my next, honestly, opinion. Honestly, AEW Dynamite has too much going on. One of the things which AEW has been praised for since their debut on TNT is the fact that they have been able to feature nearly all of their signed wrestlers on nearly every episode of Dynamite. Whether that's in a match, post-match segment, or simply an interview or pre-recorded promo. However, this strength is also their biggest flaw. There is simply too much going on during episodes, resulting in no segments having time to breathe. A great example of this is the press conference last night between FTR and Santana and Ortiz. The segment should have been great. However, it was ridiculously short, and the time between insults was seemingly shortened, which meant that the shots had no time to breathe, and it came across as a huge mess, and it didn't do anything for me. AEW have Dark Elevation and AEW Dark, where they could do matches such as Darby Allin versus Wheater Euler on instead of having matches like that on Dynamite when the show already has 5 matches. Just to be clear, that wasn't a dig at either man. Just compared to other matches that were on that card, it didn't have a story. So having that as the main event of AEW Dark Elevation would have been a great place to do it. And that way, the episode wouldn't have seemed as busy, and all that type of thing. It would have given it more space to breathe. As I've used that line a couple of times now, but it's true. What are your thoughts, Carl?
I kind of agree, but I kind of have a theory why it's like that. I agree. There's a lot going on, but it's not a bad thing either, as you said. It's a lot to consume in a 2-hour show. Yeah. You'd forget bits and stuff. It is a lot to consume. But I think they're doing it because that way when they move to Rampage, it's a seamless transaction, and they can move certain storylines to Rampage without having to try to recreate new storylines. So I reckon they're trying to build as much storylines as they can now. That way when they're building Rampage, they kind of split in half and have these feuds go over here, these feuds go over here type of thing. That way it's not a big deal when they move there.
If it was only a recent thing, I'd completely agree there. But they've done this for the last couple of years. Well, they've done it since their debut. None of them have had time to breathe, really. And of course, some segments do. But the vast majority of these, especially like the promo packages and stuff, they don't. And I think it's going to continue once on Rampage too. I think it's the way that they like to do it there. They like to, have everyone featured, which is good. But people aren't going to like this. But I feel at times it's almost slightly stressful to watch, as the amount you get shoved down your throat is just a bit much. Even though it's great, like the quality is fantastic and everything for the most part, but it's just a bit much for me at times. And I review it every week as well, and the amount of segments, like this show has more segments on it per week than Raw. Like that is just craziness. Like Raw's a whole other hour, and yet AEW has more segments. Including matches and everything, they have a total of more. And somebody said here, or Pierce said here, I feel like all their shows are overbooked. This is true because the pay-per-views are too. I've said this countless times in the past. The pay-per-views have too much on them for the most part. A couple of pay-per-views haven't actually recently. Full Gear, I think. Well, Full Gear was stacked, but I think most have got enough time there. But yeah, I mean, if they don't change it, do you have an issue with it then? If they don't change it when they move to Rampage?
I still have an issue with it now as well. But if they don't change, I have a bigger issue with it. Now I'm kind of being a bit more leaning towards I do understand it's been a problem for the last year, but you can't criticize them for wanting to give everybody time, but they kind of do need to remember you don't need to shove everything at once. Like you don't need to have Kenny Omega on Dynamite every week. You don't need to have Jon Moxley defending his title every 2 weeks or every week. Yeah. So I think they should just have Allen on 1 week because he's in the coffin match last week. So there's realistically no need to have Darby on this week.
Yeah,
and that's just time you're taking away for something else. So I think they can still do what they're doing, just spread it out. You don't need to everything. Sometimes you don't need to progress everything every week. Just let it breathe. 1 week something, 1 week another thing. The only one I would do every week is the world title, because that's the biggest belt and you want to get that as much as you want.
That's what I was going to say.
Doesn't. Yeah, and if they don't change your Rampage, I'd have a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Kenny Omega's the only guy who I don't mind, and I guess in this case the Elite, because they're all with Kenny, I don't mind them, being showcased every week. By the way, the Young Bucks weren't there this week.
Yeah,
they weren't there.
That's good. No, they weren't there.
No. I think that might be travel issue or something. Surely they won't just not be on there. But anyway, I don't mind them being on it and all that, because they're currently the champion. But as you said, perfect example, Darby Allin, he had a coffin match last week. He jumped, through a wooden coffin. Like, why is he here this week? Firstly, he's meant to be hurt. Secondly, okay, he doesn't even need to be there when they got, the stacked roster. Miro has been having a promo package every week since they've gotten to live crowds. Promo packages are just beyond repetitive already. He's great and everything. But it's been 3 weeks now in front of a full crowd, and your TNT champion hasn't had a match. Like, that is a bit questionable. You don't need these guys to be having matches every single. It's not even the matches I have a problem with, to be honest with you. It's the amount of segments and interviews. They're just shoving everyone up for the sake of it. The world champion needs to be there. The women's champion needs to be there. Apart from that, you're fine. Nobody else needs to be there. Have them rotated a bit. As long as you have, a few top stars every week so the crowd are happy, that's fine. And they can even, be in the arena and just be on another show. But such as Dark Elevation, which is already becoming AEW Dark 2.0 with the matches. That's another story. But I'm not happy with that whatsoever. Now, we're going to move on to an opinion submitted by P.S. Keenan, who's in the comments right now. He's been on the podcast a couple of times before, but here we go. Honestly, Pat McAfee has brought a lot of excitement to SmackDown, making it feel like the A show. And I completely agree with you. I was listening to his commentary. I don't watch SmackDown every single week. Well, I didn't, when I was in the Thunderdome. Of course, I watched SmackDown this week in full. I watched Money in the Bank. Well, I watch every pay-per-view in full. But, of course, I saw him commentate 2 times in 3 days. And it just became clear. Like, he gave Michael Cole a whole new sense of life. And Cole and Graves are fantastic too. But Pat McAfee, like, he's jumping around and everything. Mauro Ranallo style. He is fantastic. Like, they have hit gold with him and Michael Cole. It really is, it's brought life to, it's brought also, like, I don't actually know the age difference between Graves and Pat McAfee, but McAfee seems a bit younger. Like, the way he, acts and everything. It sends like a bit more freshness into the product and a bit more youth in a way. And it's very exciting in that way. I do completely agree. What do you think, Carl?
As much, I don't like praising Pierce, as we all know, but he's spot on at this with this one now. But I would say he didn't make SmackDown the A show. Now you're overhyping yourself there. But SmackDown's the A show because of Roman Reigns, I'll have you know. But no, I don't know. Pat McAfee is just not robotic. He's just himself, and it's such a breath of fresh air. That's the biggest difference. Where I find all the other Raw commentators are just very repetitive, and they all kind of sound the same. Even Graves he was better when he was on the NXT than he is now. He's robotic, but Pat McAfee must have something in his claws where, look, you're not being in my ear all the time. I'm just going to do my own thing, because there's like. I'm sure Vince McMahon doesn't allow every other commentator when Shinsuke Nakamura is kind of literally dogging Michael Cole, on top of him, dancing away. Like, it's not something Vince likes to have his commentators do. So I think Pat McAfee just has something in his contract. I'm fully convinced that, look, you're not being in my ear 24/7. I'm just being my own person type of thing.
Yeah, I reckon, right? Cole was told that, not Cole. Vince was told, oh, he's, this guy, Pat McAfee, and he's got his own talk show. He's, quite fairly well known. He's very charismatic. Let him do his own thing, see where it goes. He did his own thing for a couple of weeks and Vince loves it. I reckon that is just the case of it. I don't because he's new and everything, I don't think he would have gotten away with a clause as such in his contract. But I just think that Vince does like it, and that's that's Vince has got it right this time, and he has got right with commentary a lot in the past as well. But the one other one I want to talk about quickly, might have gotten his name wrong here, Jimmy Smith, the new Raw lead commentator, right? That's the name, yeah.
Yep.
When he first came in, I watched his first episode and the first couple of episodes, and I've viewed him on pay-per-views a couple of times since or whatever. And I thought, he's all right. He's better than Burke. He, knows what he's saying and that, but he was just still very robotic and very stand-back-ish. I watched Money in the Bank and Raw this week, and of course, I didn't watch Raw for a good 4 weeks before that, right? The last 4 in the Thunderdome, but I watched it this week. And he seemed a lot more, confident in everything now. And I don't think confidence was the issue. I think he was, just being careful. He was, treading on water a little bit, just making sure he didn't do anything. And he seemed fantastic. He had tons of character this week. And I thought, wait a second, this guy is one of the best lead commentators that WWE have had for a while, actually. I like Tom Phillips, and I think he's already gone above him. I think next Morrow, he's probably the best we've had in recent times. And I'm not going to crap Michael Cole either, because, you see him in the NXT UK tournament, and he was great then. He doesn't get enough respect, Cole. He does what Vince wants him to do. And, of course, with Pat McAfee, you've seen these great times as well. What have your thoughts been on Jimmy Smith?
I think Jimmy Smith, Jimmy Smith said he was a wrestling fan when he was a kid, but he fell out in love with wrestling. And now he just got this because I think he got fired from the UFC. Not fired. I think he left UFC because they've overdone in commentators. So he's and he took the WWE job because it was mainstream and it was a guaranteed paycheck every week. And he openly said that. But I think at the start he just didn't understand it really. So he's taking his time, just learning. Because I noticed he was listening a lot. So in Corey Grave, when a Michikuku drivers hit, he would say nothing, and then next week if the same moves hit, he'd say it. So I think he was just learning the moves and stuff off the other two commentators, and now he's more comfortable himself that he knows these moves. He just must have a very, very good memory, and he's able to memorize all these notes and stuff because he seems like he's much wrestling his whole life. So I don't know. It's the first few weeks he was a bit I wouldn't say bad, but he wasn't as good as he is now. So I think he was just sitting on the back burner, trying to learn what he's watching, get used to the product, and I think now he's in his comfort zone and he understands everything's going on, and he's been fantastic. I think last Monday I really noticed it. That was like the start of it. Yeah. I was like, oh, he's actually coming to his own. And then, as you said, Money in the Bank and Raw, the other night, he's been fantastic.
Yeah, he really did stand out to me then. I was like, okay. Tom Phillips, getting rid of him was questionable, considering, he was decent. He was decent, and, he was reliable. And then they got Adnan Virk, who seemed like a lovely guy. Seemed like a really lovely guy. But he was awful at his job. Let's put it that way. It's a very hard job to pull off, right? But Jimmy Smith now has come in, and based on 2 nights of stuff, he seemed really, really good now. He seems to come into his own, as you said. And everyone in the comments here is agreeing. Jimmy Smith, everyone's agreeing with us that Jimmy Smith has come into his own. And the people are saying they love him. And P.S. is replying to your opinion on Pat McAfee, saying, Roman may have made SmackDown the A show, but Pat made it the show.
Yeah, well, I don't see Pat wrestling every week. Like, how do you go from a full-time wrestler just to commentating? So. So, you know what, Pierce? I'm waiting for the day he takes a bump and gets the snot kicked out of him. That's just going to be a great day for me, man. Absolutely going to love it. Like, it's going to be fantastic.
Breaking news: Thunder Rosa signed with All Elite Wrestling, but fantastic signing for them, by the way. I'm gonna make a wrestling promotion, right? And P.S. Luna will wrestle, and you're facing Carl on it. All right, we're doing that. But
no, me and Pierce need a MMA rules fight. That's what me and Pierce need.
Oh, we're not having another flipping. You're gonna do a Hurricane Rana again, flipping heck.
No.
Turn into an AEW MMA fight, flipping it. But anyway, thank you guys for listening this week. We love all your support. Come, let us know your honest opinions below. We might choose them for next week's episode. And also, if you want to submit your own We have a Q&A thing on the Wrestling Public Instagram page every Thursday morning. I upload it there. So you can just put your opinions there and we choose the best 2 every week. Pierre said, me versus Carl in the fight pit. I'll book it. Right, thank you guys.
Perfect.
And we will see you. Actually, we won't see you next week. Sorry, I'm away next week. But we will see you in 2 weeks' time. Back better than ever. See you guys.